Hello and welcome to ICA in Conversation that broadcasts on the second and fourth Wednesdays of each month, focusing, of course, on current issues and challenges in the context of financial crime and compliance. I'm Tim Tyler, and coming up, we're going to consider romance fraud, its nature, scale, and most importantly, the impact it has on its victims. And to do this, I'm thrilled to be joined by Becky Holmes, the author of Keanu Reeves Is Not in Love with You, that, of course, explores this appalling crime. Becky, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Absolute pleasure. And so I appear on the screen.
As if by magic.
Yes.
Thank you. So just one or two more words by way of introduction. As ever, wherever you're joining us from around the world, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can, of course, contribute using the chat function. Here we are within Zoom. And for those that are joining us at some future time, accessed through one of the many different portals that we use, our website or Apple or Spotify, or through the ICA Learners Hub, thank you for your interest, and we do hope this is a good use of your time. But right now, Becky, let's make a start. You've written what is a fascinating and entertaining book about something, of course, that is itself very serious and quite dark. How did that come about? Why did you write the book, which I can see behind you as an aside, just over the right hand? There it is. Yes. So tell us about what brought you to pick up a pen and write on this subject.
It was a happy accident. So this all started, I set up a Twitter account during lockdown called @DeathToSpinach. And it was nothing to do with fraud. It was purely because I was bored of watching Boris Johnson struggle on stage. So I sort of reached out to Twitter just to, get out there in the world. And very quickly, I had an absolute ton of very young, handsome, muscly soldiers message me through my inbox, and they were all immediately in love with me, obviously. So I sort of, after a while, boredom had set in even further, and I started seeing if I could waste their time and just kind of write the most ridiculous things that I could.
Sorry, so I'm just going to interrupt you there for a moment. So what you're saying is that these amazing, good-looking soldiers, what, they weren't real, or there was something else going on?
Well, so it became apparent that everything they said, it was a script.
Okay.
And something that I always say when I talk is if one handsome soldier had messaged me, this might be a very different conversation because I do talk to anybody. So I would have engaged with one person. But the fact that there were so many, I was sort of, something's not quite right here. So after I'd sort of started kind of messing around with them a little bit and realised that they are essentially working from a script, I started posting these up on Twitter and people were finding it quite funny. And it was. But an unintended consequence of that is that actual victims of romance fraud started messaging me and saying, look, this is what's happened to me. Can I tell you about it? And it became an absolute fascination. And I just decided to learn everything that I could about it. And hey, presto, the book.
So I wonder, can we scratch that on through the surface a little on that? Tell us about these exchanges then that you were experiencing with the pseudo handsome soldiers that you were talking to. What
oil
did
rig
that play out
workers,
to?
pilots, etc.
Okay.
So what I will say, things have changed slightly because of AI. This is back a few years ago, and it would generally start with hello dear, hello pretty, hello my queen. You look nice today. You look like somebody I would like to speak to, etc. Very much the same on every interaction. You would say hello, nice to meet you too. And invariably it would be, are you married with kids? straight off. Now, at the time, the soldiers, the oil rig workers, the pilots, there would be a limited number of stories that they would have, that over time they would try and introduce the subject of money and why you might want to help them. So it was often that they were in an accident, or that they had a child to look after. Their wife had been killed in a car crash, or they'd lost their wife to cancer. There was always some sob story. And this was what was so interesting, that it was always the same, maybe sort of 6 or 7 scenarios.
So there's a sort of formula then. There's a formulaic
very much so.
approach. And if I pick up what you were saying correctly, that very often these people were beyond reach. They were on an oil rig, or they were on a pilot. They were
This is it.
pilots, or they were serving in the army.
So they deliberately choose careers which mean that you can't meet them. And in most cases, less so now because AI is making it easier, but less so that you can't even have a voice call with them. So they would say that they are in a war zone, so they can only type, they can only message. Or they're on an oil rig and the service isn't great out there in the North Sea. So they can only really manage to type. They can't do a call or a video call. There is always a reason why they can't have any communication with you other than messaging, other than typing.
So you were able to lift the lid a little on this by talking to victims, by talking to the offenders in real time, trying to understand what was going on. To you and I today, it feels so far-fetched that you wonder, why would anyone fall for that? And yet people do. And you were able to talk to victims along the way. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, I mean, now that I've become so involved in that world, it no longer surprises me when people become the victim of romance fraud, because it is very clever. I mean, I'm sort of being facetious and kind of making fun of the scammers who don't have a particularly sophisticated playbook. But some of them, they really do, and they are incredibly convincing. And if you are in a position in your life where maybe you're open to trying something new, you don't have to be lonely or desperate or vulnerable or all the stereotypes that you might think. You can just be a person who thinks they're chatting to somebody and it evolves to a relationship. So now that I'm engrossed in that world, it no longer seems unfeasible to me. And there's a lot of coercive control that goes on with this kind of fraud. So, the scammers who are good, who are successful, they use all sorts of coercive control behavior. So they will over time try to isolate victims from friends and family. They don't understand us. Please don't tell anybody about us. I'll get into trouble. Gaslighting. There's all these sorts of things where after a while, a victim of romance fraud can be sort of in this world where it is just the two of them, that it's them against the world. And that can be an attractive feeling.
So where does this all go? What's the intention behind the lies and the deceit and the relationship that's being formed over time between someone who doesn't exist and the victim?
So predictably, it's money. Also, nowadays, personal data can be just as valuable to a fraudster as straight out cash, because data, so if somebody puts together a package, date of birth, passwords, name, address, etc., that can go for a lot of money on the dark web. But let's just say for a moment that it's purely financial. Fraudsters can make a lot of money with romance fraud. Those who are putting the work in, putting the hours in, they make a lot of money. You read about victims. I've spoken to victims who have lost, no, I shouldn't say lost, who have had stolen, hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's not small amounts of money we're talking here.
And this is typically where the offender persuades them to give them money so they can travel, or they create a scenario where they're in financial difficulties or something similar.
Yeah, so it could be that they want to travel to see this person in the, let's say it's the UK, let's say it's me in the UK. Becky, I really want to travel to see you. I need some help with the plane ticket. You might say, don't worry, I can book that for you, but there'll be a reason why they say they need to do it themselves. It could be that it's coming up to, let's say, a birthday or Christmas, or some other reason why they would like you to show your level of affection by buying something. Yeah. It could be as simple. I've heard things where people are saying they're in the armed forces and they're sort of stuck over in a zone where there's not enough food, so they need basic survival money. And it's all based around emotional manipulation.
And gaslighting, which you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So what is I want to ask, what is the impact on the victims? But actually, it's already obvious that not only are they losing financially, but their hearts are being broken and they can be left quite raw. What did you see in this?
So, without exception, and I don't say that lightly, without exception, every victim of romance fraud that I spoke to had said that the fraudster could have the money again if the victim could get their peace of mind back.
Oh.
So the emotional impact is generally far higher than the financial impact. And it's not just the fact that they're losing who they believe is their partner and who they believe is their future. But it's also people lose their friends and family over this. They might borrow money. They've probably told lies in order to sort of protect the relationship because the fraudsters told them to. But equally, a lot of people that I've spoken to, they've lost trust in themselves as well. Their own decision-making process. And so many people just have decided, that's it, I'm not dating again. And that's a terrible thing. Some victims are way too young to even be contemplating staying single, obviously unless they really wanted to. But most of the time it's because they've been burned.
So I want to come on to talk about how this has been industrialized through what's been described rather appallingly as pig butchering. But before we do, it may be that someone is currently or in the future listening to this who themselves are victims of this, whether wholly or in part, or they know someone who is. Is there any advice that you would offer? I appreciate we're all different and we react in different ways, but is there any advice that you'd offer at that point?
It's a really difficult question that I get asked a lot because, as you say, we are all different. And it also depends on the stage of the fraud that the person is in. So if somebody has just started talking to someone who has one of these stories, you're more likely to be able to kind of grab that person out in time. If somebody, somebody that's listening or somebody knows somebody who has been within one of these fraudulent relationships for sort of 6-9 months a year, that's very, very hard to break somebody out of that because they are fully invested in what they believe is going to be their future. Somebody who believes they may be in a fraudulent relationship, my advice would always be leave, block, report. Do some due diligence on their social media. Ask friends and family what they think. Friends and family, they're not within that kind of emotional rush that we're in, that sort of hot state that you're in when you're in love. So looking at something objectively, getting somebody to do that can be very, very helpful. And if you know somebody who that you think is within one of these relationships already, what I would say is never go in kind of hot and heavy with, what do you think you're doing? This guy's a fraudster. Are you so stupid? That's not going to get anybody anywhere. It's a case of expressing your concern and then saying, whatever happens, talk to me. It makes no difference to me if this relationship is real or not. In terms of our friendship, I will always be here, and I want you to feel that you can talk to me no matter what happens, because people are frightened that people in their immediate circle are going to walk away from them. So they don't like to admit it. So it's that thing of showing concern, showing that you have these thoughts, but that you're not judging.
Thank you. That's really helpful. It's good advice. But of course, this has been industrialized, if I can use that term.
Yep.
And that's, I think, increasingly well known that there are various centers around the world, places like Myanmar, other places in the Far and the Middle East, and Africa, I think, where large numbers of people are working together in concert in order to scale up operations. I know you've done some work looking at this. What have you seen? What are you finding? What's going on?
I'm not the biggest expert on this, but I've certainly looked into it enough to say that it's absolutely heartbreaking. So, as you referred to before, they call it pig butchering in their language, which was originally, Southeast Asia, which they say that because they liken it to fattening up a pig for slaughter. So the victim is the pig, they're going to be fattened up, and eventually they'll be slaughtered and their money will be taken. Now, that's bad enough. But the thing is, when it's part of these scams, the victim at the end, giving the money away, isn't the only victim. The person who is doing the scam, the perpetrator, they are also the victim in these pig butchering schemes, because they have been trafficked, forced to work in scam compounds with the most awful punishments if they don't meet their quota. Now, this changes everything in the fraud landscape, because we're no longer dealing with just perpetrator and victim. We've got people in between.
Yes.
It changes everything in terms of how we view fraudsters. Like you say, the industrial, the scale of this is huge, and they're employing people, not employing, they are enslaving people who are smart with technology. We're not talking about people here who are learning. These are people who, they know tech, they know what to do.
And the way it typically plays out is that a relationship is formed either through some kind of brush buy or a dating app or something similar. Over time, that's built through just normal interaction. And that's where the technology, I think, can make a big difference, because some of that can be automated and AI can become part of the equation. So you don't actually know, for instance, are you texting, are you messaging a human being or a facsimile of a human being? And eventually, once that trust is established, then the idea about investment is introduced. And here we're seeing apps and other means by which fraudsters are persuading people to invest, which are entirely controlled by the criminal community, and the victims. But
designed to look as if they're controlled by the person putting the money in. I think
that's interesting. Yeah. So, and that's the sting, of course. The sting is everywhere around this, as you've said, from end to end, including the individuals who are doing the fraud, if you like. But the financial sting is through this so-called investment, which isn't. It's just giving the money to the criminals. Yeah.
So the fraudsters, the technology is insanely successful, insanely convincing. in a lot of cases that I've heard about, it'll be weeks, months, even over a year before the fraudster will start talking about money. When that happens, it's normally along the lines of, some, like you say, an investment opportunity. And they're given a link to something that looks like an absolutely legitimate profile, investment platform. Now you can put money in, you can take money out. So it looks as if actually you're really good at this. You put £500 in and 2 days later it's £750 and you think, oh my goodness, this is amazing. You keep doing it. Now, at some point you're going to think, I'm pretty good at this. Or somebody's saying to you, look, we could buy a house together. Let's put some more in. What do you know? You put a big chunk in, the platform's gone, your money's gone, and your potential partner is gone. And people put in vast amounts of money.
And that, I think, explains why sometimes 12 or 18 months might be needed to establish that depth of relationship and confidence that they are investing in something that's genuine and real.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there are much sort of quicker frauds that take place this way. A lot of it is done through cryptocurrency because it's quick, it's easy,
course, yeah.
It's very, very hard to trace. And when you do trace it, you can often not find who actually owns the crypto at the other end. So it can be done in a very kind of wham bam, thank you man type way. Yes. But generally, they earn a lot more when they keep the fraud going for longer and they really get that person's trust.
There's a parallel here with something else that you and I have talked about, which is the manosphere, which I didn't know too much about when you originally mentioned your interest in it. But I spent some time looking into it a little. And one of the things...
That must have been horrifying.
It is. It's truly horrifying. But actually, at the same time, kind of makes sense in a dark way. But one of the things, of course, that's going on is where you've got these very high-profile influencers operating in this who are promoting cryptocurrencies and the like. And so Louis Theroux, of course, has done quite an interesting documentary on this. And he followed the advice of these influencers and put $500 into one of these crypto things. And just a few weeks later, it had reduced to $162. Well, there you go. That's kind of part of the sting. So there's a parallel here with other types of fraud. But I wonder whether we could pivot on the back of that to talk about your more recent interest in wider forms of fraud. I know you've written another book that starts to pick out how fraud is evolving. What are the key themes that you're seeing? And what's that book for those that might be interested?
Well, here it is.
The Future
Much smaller,
of Fraud.
The Future of Fraud. Smaller, I would say a pretty quick read.
Okay.
It's quite high level. I would say it's for people who want to know what's out there and perhaps decide whether to look into other areas in more depth. I mean, we can't talk about the future of fraud without mentioning AI.
Of course. Yeah.
Awful. So AI has got amazing capabilities for all sorts of things, medical advances and productivity and all the rest of it. But for fraud, well, the capability is huge. Things can be done on scale.
Yes.
Whereas you would have potentially one man typing out a message, you can have 1,000 bots typing out a message. And in the case of something like romance fraud, it's going to be much harder to explain the red flags to somebody. So, for example, some time ago, you could say to somebody, look, if you can't video call that person, that's not right. There's something not right there. But now you can video call. And, we're seeing real-time video manipulation coming up. So I could have a conversation with you now, effectively wearing somebody else's face. So something like that is going to be incredibly difficult to combat. So there's AI, crypto, as we've mentioned. I'm terrified of crypto. I think it's just an insane thing. The problem is some people have made a lot of money, and that's, of course, very attractive. But the problem is fraudsters are increasingly asking for funds to come through crypto. It's very easy to do. And as I alluded to before, you can track where your money has gone. There are companies that will do that for you. However, when you find it at the end of where it is, you can't necessarily see who owns it.
Yeah.
So you have to argue.
Can I jump in there? So the crypto apologist would say, no, you misunderstand. The blockchain is an immutable record, a ledger that records all the activity. Rather than seeing cryptocurrency as a threat, we should see it as part of the solution because it offers us unprecedented transparency. Now, I'm not saying that's right, but that's the apologist's position, as you'll know.
Absolutely. And there is that. And I think I describe it in the new book as 50% terrifying, 50% genius, because
Yes.
I can see the attraction of it.
Yes.
And yeah, they're quite right about the blockchain and the transparency. The problem is when you look at, say, something like quantum computing, let's say, that will break the blockchain like that. The security of the blockchain will go. Now, I know we're a way off from quantum computing, but but it is still something to consider. And also, yes, you can see transparency on the blockchain. But let's say, for example, that somebody traces some crypto to a wallet in Russia, let's say. If it's a wallet in Russia, you would have to get our police to cooperate. You have to get Russian police to cooperate with our police to open an investigation to find out who owns that wallet. And I don't think at the moment that that's the top of anybody's priority list.
Well, I can tell you from experience because I used to lead for the UK in managing the high scale inquiries between the UK and the rest of the world, including Russia. And I can tell you candidly, they wouldn't even open the request. There would be no interest in supporting us there.
Yeah. So when cryptocurrency is used correctly and for legal purposes, of course, it's incredible, the blockchain and stuff and the sort of transparency that goes with it. It's great. So I would never disagree with that. My perspective is there is always a way around it for a fraudster.
Yes,
and with AI capabilities increasing as they are, it's just going to get worse. Now, I potentially will have some flack for that, but it is just my own opinion.
No, I think you're right. I think there are so many ways to subvert that record, whether it's mixers, as they're called, or ways in which we can establish wallets using pseudonyms or other means, or just the sheer movement and scale of transactions and activity, that it can all be potentially subverted. So they're the two key messages from the book, are they? AI and crypto?
Social media.
And social media.
Just like with crypto and with AI, social media is great. I'm constantly on Twitter. I live on Facebook because I'm a certain generation. I know kids now are like Facebook. It's great for bringing people together. Charities do amazing things on social media, etc. It's also a fraudster's dream. I mean, the amount of fraud on, for example, Facebook Marketplace or TikTok stores, whatever it might be. And the reason that it is such a threat is because social media companies do absolutely nothing about it. So at the moment, it's fair game for any fraudster who wants to pull any kind of scam. Social media companies currently, I think things are changing.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of pressure on them at the moment.
There is. The thing is, look at who's in charge of them. They don't care. I mean, Elon Musk, why does he care? Mark Zuckerberg, he doesn't care. We just have to hope that the people who are actually in charge of the decisions start going in a different direction, I think.
Yeah. And interesting times around this, the political and at a policy level, certainly. But I think
Yeah.
what you describe is in some ways amplified by this convergence of technologies. We're seeing payment, for instance, payment provisions embedded within social media, and all of this just facilitates the ease by which people can be ripped off.
Yeah.
Okay, we've actually run out of time.
Well, that went
Becky.
by so quickly.
I know. I'm sorry. I feel we could talk for hours on this. It is a fascinating topic, but we have touched on some important and quite difficult and maybe harrowing issues along the way. Any final thoughts from you before we bring this to a close?
I have many thoughts, Tim,
Yes, cool.
as you know. I think my final thought, it sounds maybe a little bit hippie-ish, but I'm a firm believer that we need to be looking at fraud, particularly emotionally impacting frauds, as what happens to the victim. We can have all the technology in place, all of the rules and regulations, but if we don't consider what happens to the person at the very end of this, nothing is going to be suitable. Nothing that we put in place is going to work. We need to look at how it impacts people, how those people need to be spoken to, the support that we can give. Once we've done that, things are a little bit clearer in terms of the tech, etc.
It's good advice. I think particularly given the sheer scale, the number, the millions and millions of victims,
Yeah,
whether that's just through straightforward advanced fee or other types of fraud, or through romance fraud, as we've described. Carl, as we draw to a close, Carl, thank you for your observation. It is indeed a heart-wrenching subject. If in doubt, both feet out. I think that would accord with your views, Becky. And Laura, thank you for your observation and that reminder that for those of us within the UK, there are means by which we can report. But of course, that's true for wherever we are in the world. There's means by which we can report this. But picking up on your advice, Becky, talk to family and friends, people that we can trust, and get that perspective that's not hot and immediate and affected. Well, we'll bring this to a close now. But Becky, thank you so much for your
absolute
time,
pleasure.
your interest. Good luck in that book. It sounds fascinating. I think I'll be ordering it and look forward to reading through its pages in the next few weeks. But for the moment, thank you. And wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us today, and do take good care. Bye-bye.